What do all of these places have in common? Well, they are all part of the release that we're announcing today. Over 180,000 prison registers have been added to our website. Huge thanks to all the volunteers who helped to make this possible. Now, don't worry about writing all that information down. I'm going to pop that in the chat. Now, we're really excited about this because these records are just so useful for our research. Key information is given in the prison register, which will identify the inmate. That was the whole point of them. But of course, that's also very useful to us. You see, whilst the census may give a place of birth simply as Ireland or England, in a prison register, we often see something more specific. And of course, if our ancestors died before 1851, then the earlier prison registers can be really useful because we may not be given a birthplace in the 1841 census. And the information in the prison registers are really, really helpful. And again, the ages being rounded in 1841, a specific age in the prison register, again, can be so useful to us. Another thing we see in the prison registers are aliases and name variations. This could be because someone was trying to avoid the law, so the authorities would record multiple surnames. But also married women would be recorded generally with two surnames, their maiden surname and their married surname. And people who were illegitimate, we often see them recorded under their biological father's surname as well as their mother's surname. So whatever the reason our ancestors had for having multiple names, or indeed just variations of the spelling of the same name, the authorities tried to include that information so they could sort of cover all angles, if you like. We also learn where a person has spent the greater part of their life. Now, this could be really useful to help you fill in some gaps, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. We see the residence where the person was living, and we also see an idea of their fan group. Now, if you've not come across this before, that's their friends, associates, and neighbours. This can be really useful to help pin people down. And again, I'll show you a bit of an idea of how that could work just in one of the examples we'll look at. But learning about somebody's extended family and who they were associating with can be a real key to helping us trace our family tree. You see, here we've got an 1871 census entry. This is very standard. We've got here James Ford and his wife Jessie Ford, and we've got Elizabeth Stewart, and she is a servant. We're told that Elizabeth is not just her occupation that was servant, but her relationship to James is a servant. And we're also told that she was born in Edinburgh. We see that this group of people were living in a property with just one room that had a window. So this is a very small property. So we have already learned quite a lot about Elizabeth here. So here, though, we've got the Duke Street Prison Register. This is part of our new release. This is for April 1871. Now, the 1871 census, just as a reminder, was taken on the night of the 2nd of April 1871. But let's see who was sent to prison on the 7th of April 1871. Well, here we have Elizabeth Stewart and James Ford, both living in Stockwell Street. We see that Elizabeth, along with Elizabeth Norris, Margaret Williamson, and Margaret Nicholson, were accused of importuning for prostitution. What's James accused of? Managing a brothel. Okay, well, we're already getting quite a lot more information than the census was revealing. But what about Elizabeth's personal information? The census gave us her age and birthplace. How can the prison register help? Well, we see a few differences here. We're told that Elizabeth was born in Stornoway, but she had spent the greater part of her life living in Edinburgh. Now, I wonder how often this happens. Was Elizabeth asked, where are you from? Or did the person filling out the census know she'd come from Edinburgh and therefore presumed she had been born there? Well, we can't say how that error was made. But if our ancestor, if we were looking for Elizabeth, how long would we have looked in Edinburgh? And actually, we'd be looking in entirely the wrong place. If we only had the information from the census. So these prison registers can be really useful in situations like that. Notice this little notation. This is a reference to an earlier imprisonment. And this tells us that Elizabeth was entry 552 of the year 28. Now, confusingly, different prison registers did this in a different way. That's not 1928, but it's actually the 28th year of the series of prison registers, which is a little bit complicated. But this is a reference to an earlier imprisonment. Now, with an electronic index, actually, we don't need to rely on these little references quite so often as we have done in the past, although it can be useful just to verify that it is the same person. All the same, it's a clue to check the index for an earlier imprisonment. And here it is. We see her on the 21st of February, 1871, accused of theft of a silver watch this time, and her late residence is given as Old Wynd. So it seems that she'd not been living in Stockwell Street for very long. The census is useful, but with 10 years between them, we really do miss out on a lot of house moves. We see a snapshot in time, but not what happened in between. In fact, the prison register helps us even more because Elizabeth was sentenced on this occasion to 30 days. So that means that she was not released until the 23rd of March, 1871, just about a week before the census was taken, and only about 2 weeks, sadly, before she was in prison again. So we really do get to see the timeline and the picture of what somebody's life was actually like, so much more than we would have seen just in the census. Now, I mentioned name variations, and here is an example. We've got James Killen, or Cullen, so that's Killen or Cullen. Now, this poor lad is only 19, and the prison register tells us that he was blind. So what was his crime? Well, it was begging. Now, this is quite a sad entry. I really feel sorry for the poor chap. But it does also help us to understand a little bit more information about what his life was like. And we think, right, okay, we need to look at some poor registers here to find out a little bit more about him and how he was supported. Moving forward in time, but remaining in Duke Street Prison in Glasgow, we come to an entry in 1892, and this was spotted by one of our volunteers. An unusual name in Scotland, Charging Thunder. Now, this was a showman from North America, and the prison register can tell us a lot. But we can also use the information in the prison register to follow up and look for more information. So we see he was charged with assault and he was sentenced to 30 days. A quick search in the newspapers on Find My Past, though, fills in a bit more of the background. We see this poor chap had asked for lemonade, apparently, and been given whiskey. He wasn't used to drinking alcohol, and I think he then ended up clubbing someone. So that's why he was charged with assault. So you can do that. You can take the information from the index, which is freely available on our website, and head over to the newspaper and see what else you can find. Now, many of you will already have used our paternity index. So these are cases where a sheriff court decided that the father of an illegitimate child had to pay maintenance to the child's mother. These were pursued by the mother of the child. Now, something many people ask is, well, how do we know if he paid? Did he actually pay? Well, the clue as to whether or not he paid is often in prison registers, but you don't know at what point he would have been sent to prison. So again, an electronic index helps with that. And in this particular case, we find out that Henry did not pay. He was sent to prison because he failed to pay the alimony for his child. Here it is. Failing to pay aliment for a child. So these two record sets fit together. So if you've previously found somebody who was told that he had to pay the maintenance for his child. Do follow that up if we've now covered the area for the prison records and see if they appear in there or not. Now here we've got a different prison. We're moving on to Paisley Prison now, 1857. Now, for genealogy, we often talk about indexes, don't we? We might also look at catalogues that are online, but also an important tool, and maybe we used to use it more for genealogy before there were so many electronic indexes, but these are finding aids. So what is a finding aid? Well, when a record set is not indexed, we may be able to use another record, such as a minute book, which would make it a finding aid. So you look in a register that's got limited information, you find out the names and the dates, and then you can head over to an unindexed set of records armed with that information. Well, the prison register can act as a finding aid. So here we have Mary Doherty, or Hughes. See, we've got those two surnames, and she is accused of assault. Now, she was found guilty at the Sheriff Court and sentenced to 3 months. So we've now got a finding aid, because as well as having the information from the prison register, we know that there was a Sheriff Court case and we know when that case was. So even though the Sheriff Court cases are not indexed, we know where to go. We know what time period to be looking in, which makes it much, much easier to find the cases. And we also know it's worth looking. It's worth looking because there was a case. And this, in fact, is it. This is only part of it. It's a very extensive case, and you would find out a lot more information. One of the things you see, which is that one on the right of your screen, is the accused. You see their side of the story, which could help you maybe just to put it together. Do you believe them? Do you not believe them? But it just can help you to find out a little bit more about the background, so you can understand to a greater extent why your ancestor was in prison. Now, if you do order from us, we can help you to do that, to use those as a finding aid. And we can also access the records in the National Records of Scotland for you if you can't visit yourself. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the records that we have added. So that actually brings Scotland's criminal database to over 500,000 prison register entries. Now, that's only the prison register. There are also court records on there as well, which we've talked about at previous conferences. So huge thank you, but also congratulations to our volunteers who have helped to bring us this index to you today. Over the coming weeks, we'll share more gems that we have found on Facebook. We'll put that on social media, the other social media channels as well. And for everybody who uses our services or donates to the conference today, there will be in the email that we'll send you, there'll be a link to our newsletter. You can sign up to our free newsletter, and there'll be more stories in there as well, and tips on how to get the most out of it. So hopefully you will find some gems. Hopefully it'll help you to solve some problems, as well as just get that timeline in place and find out a little bit more about your ancestors. So let us know if you've got any questions about it. And as I say, I'll put that new coverage and a link to the full coverage that is on our website in the chat.